What if the worst customer you ever served was also the key to unlocking your wildest dreams? For one waitress, a single sentence spoken in a language she wasn't supposed to know changed everything. This isn't a fairy tale. This is a story about how a moment of kindness in a noisy New York diner caught the attention of a man who didn't just see a waitress. He saw a wasted masterpiece. It's a story of a cryptic note, a private jet ticket, and a test so demanding it could shatter her or turn her into the person she was always meant to be. The smell of stale coffee and burnt bacon grease was the perfume of Sofia Ramirez's life. It clung to her hair, her cheap polyester uniform, and the weary lines around her 28-year-old eyes. She worked at the Nova Cafe in Manhattan's Upper East Side, a place that, like its name, pretended to be something grander than it was. It had polished brass railings that were always smudged with fingerprints and red vinyl booths that were cracked like old leather. It was a purgatory for the city's aspiring artists, actors, and in Sofia's case, displaced dreamers. Each morning she would tie her apron, the strings frayed from 1,000 shifts, and paste on a smile that rarely reached her eyes. She was good at her job, efficient, polite, and almost invisible, the perfect waitress. No one poring over their Wall Street Journal or complaining about the temperature of their soup would ever guess that Sofia could analyze the symbolism in Diego Rivera's murals or debate Latin American magical realism. No one knew that 6 years ago she had been a rising star at the National Autonomous University of Mexico in Mexico City, living a life painted in the vibrant colors of her dreams. Then came the crisis. Her mother's sudden illness, the family's eviction from their modest home in Guadalajara amid rising cartel violence, the desperate decision to cross the border with forged papers and whatever savings they had. Her dream dissolved overnight. She arrived in New York alone, leaving behind the bustling markets of her childhood for the cracked pavement of a tiny Queens apartment she now shared with her cousin Lucia. Mexico City became a ghost, a painful whisper of a life that belonged to someone else. "Order up!" barked Ramon the cook, his voice a gravelly roar over the sizzle of the griddle. Sofia grabbed the heavy plates, the heat warming her forearms. "Thanks, R." She moved through the cramped diner with a practiced grace, weaving between tables and busboys. Table 7 was her nemesis today, a man in a pinstripe suit, probably in his late 40s, who had already sent back his orange juice because it had too much pulp. His name was Mr. Hargrove, and he was trying desperately to impress his much younger date. "And make sure the steak is medium rare," he'd ordered earlier, snapping his fingers. "Not medium, not rare. If it bleeds, I'm sending it back. If it's grey, I'm sending it back. Got it, sweetheart?" Sofia had just smiled. "Perfectly clear, sir." As she navigated the lunchtime rush, her eyes briefly scanned the room. In the far corner booth, a man sat alone. He was different from the usual crowd. He wasn't on his phone or trying to be seen. He was just watching. He was dressed in a simple dark grey cashmere sweater and charcoal trousers. There was no flashy watch, no ostentatious display of wealth, but the cut of his clothes and the quiet intensity in his gaze spoke of a different world. He nursed a single black coffee, and every time she passed, she felt his observant eyes on her. It wasn't creepy, just analytical. She'd pegged him as a writer or perhaps a professor. He had an air of quiet contemplation about him. "2 more coffees for table 9, whispered Elena as they crossed paths near the kitchen. "And Hargrove is asking for you again. He says his water tastes too municipal." Sofia sighed, rubbing her temple. "Of course he does. I'll get the bottled water." It was just another Tuesday, a relentless cycle of pouring coffee, taking orders, and absorbing the casual condescension of people who had never known what it felt like to choose between paying rent and sending money home to a sick parent. She moved toward Hargrove's table, her tray of water bottles balanced perfectly, unaware that this mundane, soul-crushing Tuesday was about to cleave her life in two. The man in the corner took a slow sip of his coffee, his gaze following her, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. He wasn't just watching a waitress, he was waiting. The bell above the diner door chimed, announcing a new arrival. An elderly woman, looking flustered and out of place, stepped inside. She clutched a large handbag, her eyes wide, scanning the chaotic room as if she'd walked into a foreign jungle. Her clothes were elegant but simple, a classic trench coat over a silk scarf, suggesting a tourist who had taken a wrong turn off Madison Avenue. She approached the host stand, where a new hire, a teenager named Tyler, was struggling to manage the seating chart. "Una mesa, por favor," she asked, her Spanish heavily accented and uncertain, laced with a rural dialect from Oaxaca. Tyler stared at her blankly. "A what table?" "Para una." "Por favor," she repeated, her voice trembling slightly. Yeah, hold on," Tyler mumbled, not looking up from his list. The woman waited, looking increasingly distressed. She tried again, this time in her native tongue, a rapid-fire stream of Spanish, explaining she was lost. Her phone battery was dead, and she was supposed to meet her family at the Metropolitan Museum, but she thought it was the Guggenheim. Tyler just shook his head. "Sorry, lady, I don't speak whatever that is. Mexican." From his table, Mr. Hargrove let out a loud theatrical sigh. "Oh, for heaven's sake, let a man of culture handle this." He pushed his chair back and stood up, puffing out his chest as he approached the woman. "Hola, senora," he said, his accent a grotesque caricature. I can help you. You, want a table?" The woman just looked more confused. "Quiere, sentarse?" he continued, gesturing wildly at an empty table. Sophia, who was delivering a basket of bread to a nearby table, felt a hot flush of second-hand embarrassment. It was painful to listen to. Hargrove was butchering the language, turning its rhythmic beauty into a clumsy assault on the ears. Sophia couldn't stand it anymore. It was more than just his terrible Spanish. It was his arrogance, his smug satisfaction in making a spectacle of this poor, lost woman. It was the same condescension he'd shown her all afternoon. Something inside her, the part that remembered debating Borges in university seminars, finally snapped. She placed the bread on the table, wiped her hands on her apron, and approached the elderly woman. The man in the corner booth, Victor Langford, leaned forward ever so slightly, his coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. Sophia looked at the woman and smiled gently. Then she spoke. The voice that came out was not the tired, flat voice of a New York waitress. It was a voice from another life, as warm and fluid as a Mexico City sunset. "Señora, perdone la interrupción. Este hombre no la entiende. ¿Puedo ayudarla? Parece perdida." The room seemed to fall silent around their small group. Hargrove's jaw went slack. His date stared at Sophia with wide, disbelieving eyes. Ramon peeked out from the kitchen window. The woman's face, however, lit up with profound relief. "Ay, Dios mío, sí!" she exclaimed, her hand flying to her chest. She launched into her story again, but this time the words found a safe harbor. She explained her confusion about the museums, her dead phone, her worry about her family leaving without her. Sophia listened patiently, nodding and offering reassuring words. "No se preocupe, señora. Todo va a estar bien." She turned to Tyler. "Tyler, can you seat this lady at table 12, please, and bring her a glass of water and a menu?" Then she turned back to the woman. "Please have a seat. Let me use my phone to call your family. What is the name on the reservation?" While the woman, whose name was Doña Morales, fumbled in her purse for her family's contact info, Sophia turned to face Mr. Hargrove. His face was a mottled shade of red, a mixture of fury and humiliation. "If you'll excuse me, sir," Sophia said, her voice reverting to its polite professional tone, "I'll get you that bottled water now." She didn't wait for a reply. She walked away, leaving him standing there, utterly deflated. She retrieved her phone from her locker, made a quick call, and sorted out Doña Morales's predicament. The family was waiting another hour. She gave the woman clear directions written on a napkin to a taxi stand just a block away. Doña Morales was effusive in her gratitude, pressing a crumpled $20 bill into Sophia's hand, which Sophia gently refused. "Es un placer, señora. Que tenga un buen viaje." As Doña Morales left, a sense of quiet satisfaction settled over Sophia. For the first time in a long time, she felt like herself again. She had forgotten what that felt like. She went to clear Hargrove's table, expecting him to be gone. He was, but he'd left a paltry $1 tip on a $100 bill. She wasn't surprised. What did surprise her was that the man in the corner booth was also getting up to leave. He caught her eye as he slid on a tailored navy blue coat. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, a look of profound appraisal in his eyes. He left a crisp $100 bill on his table for a $3 coffee and walked out without a word. Sophia pocketed the generous tip, feeling a small thrill of victory. She thought that was the end of it, a brief, satisfying moment of rebellion in an otherwise grey existence. She had no idea it was only the beginning. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of routine. The diner emptied out, the frantic energy of the lunch rush replaced by the quiet hum of the late afternoon. Sophia refilled salt shakers, wiped down sticky ketchup bottles, and tried not to think about Mr. Hargrove's sneer or the surprising weight of the quiet man's gaze. She was just Sophia, the waitress. The flicker of the Sorbonne-level scholar had been just that, a flicker. When her shift finally ended at 5:00 p.m., she felt the familiar ache in her feet and the deeper ache in her soul. She slung her worn messenger bag over her shoulder and headed for the back exit. "Hey, Ramirez!" She turned. It was Ramon, wiping his hands on his greasy apron. He was holding something, a sleek black envelope. The quiet guy, the one in the corner booth. "He came back a few minutes ago, said he forgot to give this to you. Told me to make sure you got it personally." Sophia frowned, taking the envelope. It was made of heavy, expensive cardstock, unlike anything she'd ever held. There was no name on it, no address, just a simple, elegant silver seal holding it closed, the stylized wings of what looked like an eagle. "Weird, right?" Ramon grunted. "Looked like a spy or something." "Anyway, see you tomorrow." Sophia murmured her thanks and slipped out into the alley. The evening air was cool against her flushed skin. Leaning against the brick wall under the dim glow of a security light, she broke the seal. Her fingers trembled slightly. Inside were 2 items. The first was a business card as thick and black as the envelope. The silver eagle crest was embossed at the top. Below it in minimalist silver lettering were a name and a title. Victor Langford, CEO, Langford Global. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. Langford Global wasn't just some tech company. It was a global titan, a behemoth in aerospace logistics and cutting-edge AI. Victor Langford was a legend, a reclusive genius who had built an empire from scratch. He was a billionaire many times over, famously private and rarely photographed. That was the quiet man from the diner. It seemed impossible. The second item made her heart stop altogether. It was a plane ticket, or rather a reservation confirmation for a private jet. A Gulfstream G650, scheduled to depart from Teterboro Airport in New Jersey the next day at noon. The destination, Benito Juarez International Airport, Mexico City. The passenger's name, Sophia Ramirez. Tucked into the fold of the ticket was a small handwritten note on matching black stationery. The handwriting was sharp and decisive, a bold forward-slanting script in silver ink. Miss Ramirez, talents should never be wasted on serving mediocrity. A voice like yours belongs in Mexico City, not in a diner arguing over bottled water. A car will be waiting for you at your address tomorrow at 10 a.m. Your seat will be waiting. This is not a request. It's an opportunity. As Sophia read the note once, then twice, then a third time, her mind reeled. The alley seemed to tilt, the sounds of the city fading into a dull roar. This had to be a joke, an elaborate, cruel prank. Maybe Hargrove had set it up to mock her further. But how would he know her address and the expense? Say, private jet to Mexico City. She stumbled home in a daze, the black envelope clutched in her hand like a talisman. When she burst into her tiny Queen's apartment, Lucia was on the couch scrolling through her phone, while a telenovela blared in the background. "Hi, you look like you've seen a ghost," Lucia said, looking up. Sophia didn't speak. She just walked over and laid the contents of the envelope on the coffee table. The business card, the jet ticket, the note. Lucia picked up the card. "Langford Global. Isn't that—" Her eyes widened. She read the note, then looked at the ticket. She looked back at Sophia, her mouth agape. "¿Qué es esto?" "I don't know," Sophia whispered, sinking onto the couch. "It's insane." He was there at the diner. "The guy I told you about, who left the $100 tip." Lucia's initial shock quickly morphed into deep-seated suspicion. She was a factory worker, pragmatic and protective by nature, having fled the same violence that uprooted Sophia. "Okay, hold on. A strange billionaire leaves you a private jet ticket to Mexico City, Sophia. This is every red flag in the book. This is how horror movies start. Cartel connections, a weird cult, some kind of creepy pretty woman fantasy. You cannot be serious, I know. I know, Sophia said, running a hand through her hair. It's crazy. But the note, talent should never be wasted. He saw. He heard. He heard you speak Spanish, Lucia counted, standing up and pacing the small living room. That's it. For all you know, this guy has some bizarre fetish for accents or immigrants. Sophia, you don't know anything about him. And you're undocumented. This could be ice bait. He's Victor Langford, Sophia said quietly. He's one of the most famous businessmen in the world. He's not some random creep. Rich people can be the biggest creeps of all, Lucia shot back. And how did he get your address? That's what I want to know. That's not just observant. That's investigative. It's stalker-level stuff, especially for someone like you, no papers, sending money home every month. The question hung in the air, heavy and unnerving. How did he know where she lived? Sophia's mind raced. He must have had someone follow her, or run her name through a database. The ease with which he had pierced the veil of her anonymity was terrifying, especially with her immigration status hanging by a thread. But beneath the fear, something else was stirring, a wild, dangerous hope. Mexico City. The word alone was a physical ache in her chest. The ticket on the table wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a doorway back to the life that had been stolen from her. It was a chance to see her mother, to reclaim her studies, to breathe air that smelled of street tacos and jacaranda trees. What if it's real? Sophia asked, her voice barely a whisper. What if it's just an opportunity, like he said? And what if it's a trap? Lucia retorted, her arms crossed. You throw away your job, your life here, risk deportation on the whim of a man you met for 5 seconds. For a cryptic note, be realistic. Sophia looked around the cramped apartment at the peeling paint on the walls, the stack of overdue bills on the counter, the envelope with remittance slips to Guadalajara. She thought of her uniform hanging by the door, smelling of grease. This was her reality. It was safe, predictable, and it was slowly suffocating her, far from home, always looking over her shoulder. The note said, "This is not a request." It felt like a command, but also a challenge to be more than what she had become. The fear was real. Lucia's warnings were logical. Deportation loomed like a shadow. But the pull of Mexico City, the intoxicating possibility of escape, was stronger. It was the most terrifying decision of her life. She looked at Lucia, her cousin, her anchor in this difficult life. "I think I have to go," Sophia said, the words tasting strange and foreign on her tongue. "I have to know." The next morning was a whirlwind of anxiety and adrenaline. Sophia called the diner and quit, her voice shaking as she left a message for her manager, Mr. Ellis. She imagined his annoyance, his casual dismissal of her as just another flaky immigrant waitress. The thought, which would have bothered her yesterday, felt strangely liberating today. Packing was a surreal experience. What does one pack for a clandestine trip to Mexico City, offered by a reclusive billionaire? Her entire wardrobe consisted of worn jeans, faded t-shirts, and a single embroidered blouse from her mother's village. She stuffed them into her old scuffed suitcase, feeling foolish and hopelessly out of her depth. Lucia watched her, a storm of worry on her face. "I ran a background check on him, or tried to. He's a ghost. No scandals, no tabloid fodder, just business articles and philanthropy announcements. He's either a saint or very, very good at hiding things. But Sophia, if this goes wrong, you could end up back in Mexico permanently or worse. Maybe he's just private," Sophia said, trying to convince herself as much as Lucia. "And if it's real, I could send more money home. Finish my degree remotely. Private people don't summon undocumented waitresses to Mexico City with anonymous notes." Lucia shot back. "I'm serious, Prima. I've put a tracking app on your phone. Don't you dare turn it off. And I want you to check in with me every 3 hours. If I don't hear from you, I'm calling your tia in Guadalajara, the consulate, everyone." Sophia hugged her cousin tightly, grateful for her fierce loyalty. "I'll be careful. I promise." At precisely 10 a.m., a black Mercedes-Benz S-Class sedan, so silent it seemed to materialize out of thin air, pulled up to their apartment building. A chauffeur in a crisp black suit stepped out and opened the rear door. He didn't ask for her name. He simply nodded and said, "Miss Ramirez, we are ready when you are." The ride to Teterboro Airport was silent and smooth. Sophia stared out the tinted windows at the city rushing by, feeling a profound sense of detachment, as if she were watching a movie of someone else's life, praying no one asked for ID. They didn't go to the main terminal, but to a private executive hangar. There, gleaming on the tarmac, was the Gulfstream G650. It was a vision of power and grace, larger and more imposing than she could have ever imagined. A flight attendant with a warm smile greeted her at the steps. "Welcome aboard, Miss Ramirez. Mr. Langford has arranged everything for your comfort. May I take your bag?" The interior of the jet was a study in understated luxury. Cream leather seats, polished mahogany wood, and subtle silver accents that echoed the eagle crest. It was more like a flying luxury apartment than an airplane. She was the only passenger. As the jet taxied down the runway, Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the point of no return, crossing borders in ways she never imagined. The engines roared and the plane surged forward with incredible force, pressing her back into her plush seat. Within moments they were airborne, climbing steeply into the clouds. Below her, New York City shrank. The diner, her apartment, her old life, all of it vanishing into a haze. She was untethered, suspended between the world she knew and future that was a complete and terrifying unknown. The flight attendant served her a lunch that was better than any meal she had ever served at the Nova. Cafe, grilled fish with mole sauce, fresh nopales, and a glass of mezcal that burned like liquid memories on her tongue. It all felt like a dream. She half expected to wake up to the sound of her alarm clock in her tiny queen's bedroom, but 5 hours later, the dream continued. As the jet began its descent, the sprawl of Mexico City emerged from the haze below, Ava's sea of lights punctuated by the glow of the Zocalo. The angel of independence stood golden against the night. A lump formed in Sophia's throat. She was back. After 6 years of yearning, she was finally back. They landed at a private terminal to avoid customs scrutiny. There was no line, no baggage claim chaos. She was escorted from the plane directly to another waiting car, another silent chauffeur. They drove through the streets of Mexico City, past familiar landmarks that made her heart ache with bittersweet nostalgia. The Palacio de Bellas Artes, the Catedral Metropolitana. It was all as vibrant as she remembered. The car, however, didn't stop at a hotel. It pulled up to a set of imposing wrought-iron gates that opened onto a private tree-lined cobblestone drive in Pedregal. At the end of it stood a magnificent hacienda-style mansion, a grand private residence of stone and tile, its windows glowing warmly in the night. The chauffeur opened her door. "Welcome to Mr. Langford's Mexico City residence, Miss Ramirez." Her legs felt weak as she walked up the stone steps. The massive wooden door swung open before she could touch it. Standing in the grand tiled foyer was Victor Langford. He was dressed in a simple dark sweater and trousers, just as he had been in the diner. Up close, she could see faint lines of fatigue around his sharp, intelligent eyes. He was younger than she'd thought, perhaps in his late 30s. "Miss Ramirez," he said, his voice a calm, low baritone. "Welcome to Mexico City. I trust your flight was comfortable. Yes, thank you," she stammered, feeling small and out of place in the cavernous hall with its soaring ceilings and priceless-looking pre-Columbian art. "Mr. Langford, I don't understand any of this." "I know," he said, a faint smile touching his lips. "Clarity is the purpose of your visit. But first you must be exhausted. My housekeeper will show you to your room. We can talk in the morning." He gestured, and a woman in a grey uniform appeared. As Sophia followed her up a sweeping staircase, she glanced back. Victor Langford was watching her with the same unreadable, analytical expression he'd had in the diner. He hadn't explained a thing. The mystery, she realized, was only getting deeper. This was not a gift. It was a prelude. Sophia awoke to the unfamiliar sensation of sleeping on sheets with a thread count higher than her monthly remittances. Sunlight streamed through tall arched windows, illuminating a bedroom that was larger than her entire queen's apartment. It was exquisitely decorated in shades of terracotta and soft blue, with a small fountain courtyard view and a private balcony overlooking a lush garden. A fresh agua fresca and a cup of café de olla were already waiting for her on a small table. It was a beautiful cage, and she was still a prisoner of confusion and visa worries, After dressing in her one good embroidered blouse, which now felt woefully inadequate, she made her way downstairs. She found Victor Langford in a vast book-lined study, reviewing documents on a sleek, transparent tablet. He looked up as she entered, gesturing for her to sit in one of the leather armchairs opposite his large desk. "Good morning," he said. "Please have a seat." "Mr. Langford," she began, her voice firmer than she expected, "I appreciate the flight and the accommodations, but I need to know why I'm here. This is abnormal, and my status here—" "I appreciate that directness," he said, setting his tablet aside and giving her his full attention. "You are here, Miss Ramirez, because I am in need of a very specific skill set. A skill set I believe you possess despite your current employment, and I've ensured discretion regarding your documentation for this trip." Before he could elaborate, the study door opened. A woman entered, her heels clicking decisively on the polished tile floor. She was tall, impossibly chic, and radiated an aura of intimidating authority. She wore a perfectly tailored pantsuit, and her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes, the same piercing grey as Victor's, swept over Sophia with a cool, dismissive glance. "Victor, you're late for the Herrera preliminary," she said. Her voice crisp and laced with an accent that was a hybrid of British boarding school and American corporate law. She stopped and looked at Sophia again, a flicker of annoyance crossing her features. "Is this her?" "The waitress." Victor's face remained impassive. "Sophia Ramirez, this is my sister, Valentina Langford. She's the chief operating officer of Langford Global." "Valentina, this is Miss Ramirez." Valentina offered a smile that was as sharp and cold as a shard of glass. "A pleasure, though I confess I don't quite understand the purpose of this experiment, Victor." She turned her gaze back to Sophia. "My brother has a penchant for seeing potential in the most unlikely of places. He seems to think that because you can speak Spanish, you can solve a multi-billion-dollar problem for us. An immigrant waitress, no offense, but with no papers." Sophia's head was spinning. "Our multi-billion-dollar problem. What did they think she was?" Victor finally offered an explanation. "Langford Global is in the final stages of acquiring a company, a Mexican company, Casa Herrera." Sophia knew the name. Everyone did. Casa Herrera was a legendary Mexico City luxury house founded in the 19th century. They were famous for their handcrafted silver jewelry and textiles, a bastion of indigenous craftsmanship and Mexican heritage. "Herrera is family-owned," Victor continued. "It has been for 6 generations, and the current patriarch, Don Emilio Herrera, is resistant to the acquisition. He is a traditionalist. He believes an American tech company like ours will destroy his family's legacy. We've sent teams of the best lawyers and negotiators in the world, and they've all failed. They don't speak his language. And I don't mean Spanish," Valentina interjected, her tone dripping with skepticism. "They don't speak the language of the nuance of culture, of respect for tradition. Don Emilio slammed the door on our last M&A head because he mispronounced Oaxaca and wore a sombrero as a joke." Sophia was beginning to understand. "You need a translator." "No," Victor said, leaning forward. "We have hundreds of translators. I need more than that. I need a bridge. I need someone who understands the subtlety of Mexican culture, who has lived the immigrant struggle, who can show respect for their heritage, but who also understands the directness and ambition of the American mindset. Someone who can navigate both worlds." He paused, his eyes locking onto hers. "In the diner, I didn't just see a waitress speaking Spanish. I saw a woman of intelligence and grace handle a difficult, arrogant man with poise. Then I saw her treat a lost, frightened woman with compassion and empathy, using flawless colloquial Spanish, not to show off, but to genuinely connect and help. That combination, poise under pressure, cultural fluency, and genuine empathy, is rarer than you can imagine. It cannot be taught in a business school." Valentina let out a quiet, impatient sigh. "It's a romantic notion, Victor. A lovely story. But this is a $2.7 billion acquisition, not a social experiment. Miss Ramirez has no corporate experience, no background in finance or law. She served pie yesterday. And let's be frank, her legal status complicates everything. The insult landed like a physical blow, but Sophia held her ground. She refused to let this woman diminish her. "And what is it you do exactly when you're not a waitress?" Valentina pressed, her eyes narrowing. "What hidden talents did my brother unearth with his little private investigation? Crossing borders doesn't qualify you for boardrooms. The question confirmed Sophia's fears. He had investigated her, including her immigration history. I was a student, Sophia said, her voice steady, at UNAM in Mexico City. I studied art history and Latin American cultural studies. I had to leave before I could finish my degree due to family crisis and circumstances beyond my control. Victor nodded slowly as if this confirmed something he already knew. Valentina, however, looked unimpressed. So you're a college dropout? An undocumented one? My sister lacks a certain subtlety, Victor said, shooting a warning look at Valentina. Here is the situation, Miss Ramirez. This is not a vacation. It is, for all intents and purposes, a job interview. The most unorthodox job interview of your life. I want you to be part of the team meeting with Don Emilio Herrera and his family. I don't want you to negotiate finances. I want you to listen, to observe, to build a bridge where we have only found walls. Your status will be protected temporarily. And if I succeed, Sophia asked, if you help us secure this deal, Victor said, I will create a position for you at this company, Director of Cultural Integration for our Latin American acquisitions. You will have a new life, a salary that will solve any family needs you might have, a path to legal status through the company, and a career that utilizes your actual talents. I will also fund the completion of your degree, should you still wish for it. It was an offer that was beyond comprehension, a lifeline not just to solvency, but to legitimacy, to a life she thought was lost forever. And if I fail? Valentina answered before Victor could. If you fail, Miss Ramirez, a car will take you back to the airport, and you will be on the next flight back to New York. You can have your old job back at the diner. We will, of course, compensate you for your time and forget we ever met. Her tone made it clear that failure was the only outcome she expected. The weight of their expectations, of the entire surreal situation, her fragile status, pressed down on Sophia. This was insane. They were asking her to step into a corporate shark tank with nothing but a half-finished arts degree, her fluency in Spanish and the grit of survival. But then she thought of the diner. The grease, the condescension, the slow grinding death of her spirit, and the constant fear of a knock on the door. Failure here meant returning to that. Success meant everything. She looked from Valentina's cold, challenging stare to Victor's quiet, expectant one. She took a deep breath. When is the meeting? She asked. The next 2 days were a brutal high-speed education in the world of corporate acquisitions. Sophia was given an office in Langford's Mexico City headquarters in Polanco, a space with a view that was probably worth more than she had earned in her entire life. She was buried under an avalanche of files, financial reports, market analyses, legal documents, and most importantly, a thick dossier on Don Emilio Herrera and his family. All while a discreet lawyer handled her temporary visa extension, she devoured every page. She learned that Don Emilio was 82 years old, a widower, and had run the company with an iron fist for 50 years. He was a legend in the artisan world, a purist who despised the modern trends of mass production and global branding. The dossier was filled with failed attempts by other companies to acquire Casa Herrera. Don Emilio had dismissed them all as gringo exploiters who wouldn't know a Zapotec weave from a factory knockoff. Valentina made her disdain for the situation clear. She would periodically enter Sophia's office, quiz her on obscure financial data, and point out her lack of experience. "Do you even know what EBITDA means, Miss Ramirez?" she'd ask with a smug look. "No," Sophia admitted honestly, "but I know that Don Emilio's favorite artist is Frida Kahlo, that he believes the soul of his company resides in the specific silver filigree technique developed by his great-grandfather in Oaxaca, and that he sees this deal not as a financial transaction, but as the potential desecration of his family's legacy and the jobs of hundreds of indigenous artisans. Perhaps that is more important than earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization." The response left Valentina momentarily speechless, which gave Sophia a small surge of confidence. She knew she couldn't compete on their turf. She couldn't talk finance or law, but she could understand people. She could understand culture, the pain of displacement, the pride of roots. That had to be her strength. The day of the meeting arrived. Sophia was a bundle of nerves. A stylist summoned by Victor had provided her with a simple, elegant huipil-inspired dress by a discreet Mexican designer and low heels. Understated. Respectful, the stylist had advised. The meeting was to be held at the Casa Herrera Atelier in Coyoacán, a hallowed space that felt more like a workshop of living history than a shop. As their car pulled up, Sophia could see a small army of lawyers and executives from Langford Global waiting on the cobblestones, all looking tense. Victor, Valentina, and Sophia got out of the car. Victor gave Sophia a reassuring nod. "Remember, you are not here to speak for me. You are here to listen for me." Valentina simply sniffed. "Try not to spill anything or mention your visa." They entered the building. The air inside was filled with the scent of polished silver and fresh dyes. They were led up a privet staircase to a formal salon on the upper floor. And there, sitting in a carved wooden armchair, was Don Emilio Herrera. He was a sturdy man with weathered hands, sharp, intelligent eyes, and a neatly trimmed mustache. He was flanked by his two daughters, both stern-faced women in their 50s. Introductions were made. When Sophia was introduced as part of our cultural liaison team, Don Emilio's eyes lingered on her for a moment, a flicker of curiosity in their depths, recognizing, perhaps, a shared accent from the provinces. The meeting began, and it was a disaster. Valentina, taking the lead, launched into a slick presentation filled with charts and projections about synergy, global market expansion, and shareholder value. She spoke with a cold corporate precision that clearly grated on Don Emilio. The patriarch listened, his face an unreadable mask. After 15 minutes, he held up a calloused hand. "Basta, Señorita Langford," he said, his voice soft but carrying immense authority. "I have heard these words before. They are empty numbers on a page. You talk of expanding my brand. You speak of it as if it is a chain of taco stands. You do not understand what we do here. The soul, the hands of my people." Valentina's professional smile tightened. "Don Emilio, with all due respect, the soul of a company does not pay its artisans to fund its growth in a competitive global market." It was the wrong thing to say. A chill descended upon the room. Don Emilio's daughter, Maria, spoke for the first time. "My father finds your approach aggressive, Señorita." Like so many before you, the meeting devolved from there. The two sides were speaking different languages, just as Victor had predicted. The Langford team talked about efficiency and profit. The Herrera family talked about heritage and art, the blood of generations. Sophia remained silent, watching and listening. She noticed the small details. She saw how Don Emilio's hand rested on a particular silver cuff on the table beside him. She noticed the mural on the wall behind him. Not a famous masterpiece, but a vibrant, intimate scene of Oaxacan weavers. It had the bold, symbolic style of Rivera, but with a personal touch. As the meeting was about to end in a complete stalemate, Sophia felt a desperate urge to do something. This was her one shot. Victor caught her eye, and she saw the question in his gaze. He gave her the slightest of nods. "Permission, Don Emilio," Sophia said, her voice quiet but clear. The entire room turned to look at her. "Forgive my interruption." She stood up and walked not toward the negotiating table, but toward the mural on the wall. "This is a beautiful piece," she said, speaking in Spanish. Her accent, warm with the cadences of Guadalajara, seemed to warm the air. "The symbolism is so powerful. It reminds me of Rivera, but it's more personal, less monumental. Is it a family piece?" Don Emilio's austere expression softened for the first time. He looked surprised and intrigued. "You have a good eye, Mija. That is a mural of my grandmother's village, painted by a local artist who worked in our atelier. It is my most treasured possession." "She is weaving," Sophia observed, looking closer. It was unusual for a woman to be centered like that in those days, unless she was a master artisan. She must have been a remarkable woman. "She was," Don Emilio said, a note of pride in his voice. "She is the one who taught my grandfather the filigree secrets passed down from Zapotec masters. She was the true guardian of our house. Her vision, our people's vision." Valentina was staring at Sophia, her mouth slightly open, a look of utter disbelief on her face. The lawyers were shuffling their papers, confused by this sudden turn in conversation. Sophia turned from the mural to face Don Emilio. "Mr. Langford's company is built on technology and data. It is a world of numbers. But he understands that a legacy like yours is not built on numbers. It is built on vision. The vision of a woman like her," she gestured to the mural. "He does not want to erase that vision. He wants to give it a new voice, to share it with a world she could never have dreamed of, while protecting the hands that create it. A company without a soul is just a machine. You are the soul of Casa Herrera. He is not here to buy a machine. He is here to protect a work of art, and the families it feeds. She had used the word art. She had connected the present to the past, the boardroom to the barrio. She had shown that she saw not just a brand, but a story of survival like her own. Silence filled the room. Don Emilio stared at Sophia, his sharp eyes searching. Then he slowly turned his gaze to Victor Langford. Your father was a builder. Was he not? A factory worker? He was a mechanic, Victor said, who had remained silent. He taught me that the foundation is everything, the people. Don Emilio nodded slowly. A small, genuine smile touched his lips for the first time. Perhaps we can have café next week, and you can leave your presentation at your office, he said, gesturing to Valentina's laptop. Just you and me. And he added, his eyes finding Sophia. You will bring Señorita Ramirez. The walk back to the car was surreal. The Langford executives were buzzing with excitement, clapping Victor on the back. For the first time in months they had made progress. They had a second meeting. Valentina was silent, her expression a thunderous mix of shock and resentment. As they got into the car, she finally turned to Sophia. That was a lucky trick, she said, her voice low and sharp. A parlor game with an old mural. It wasn't a trick, Valentina, Victor said, his voice firm. He looked at Sophia, and for the first time she saw open admiration in his eyes. It was insight. She listened. Something your team of experts failed to do. She found the foundation. Valentina said nothing more for the rest of the ride, simply staring out the window, defeated. The café with Don Emilio the following week was a resounding success. Without the lawyers and presentations, the conversation flowed easily. Sophia acted as the bridge, just as Victor had hoped. She would translate not just their words, but their intent. When Victor spoke of platforms and digital ecosystems, Sophia would rephrase it to Don Emilio as creating a digital mercado where the stories of the artisans could be shared with the world, fair wages guaranteed. They talked for how it's not about money, but about art history, family, and legacy, the immigrant dream. By the end of the week, the deal was signed. Casa Herrera was now part of Langford Global, but with contractual guarantees protecting its heritage, its Oaxacan workshops, and with Don Emilio himself appointed to a lifetime seat on the board as a brand guardian, plus funds for artisan cooperatives. The night the deal was finalized, Victor hosted a small celebration at his mansion. Sophia stood on the balcony of her room, the same one she had woken up in just over a week ago, looking out at the twinkling lights of Mexico City. She felt like a completely different person from the weary waitress who had stepped off that plane. Victor came to stand beside her. For a few moments they stood in comfortable silence. I owe you a great deal, Sophia, he said finally. You gave me an opportunity, she replied. That's more than anyone else ever has. Away back and forward. The offer I made is on the table, he said, turning to face her. Director of Cultural Integration, a very generous salary, full legal sponsorship, a housing allowance here in Mexico City, and a blank check for your education. It's yours. No interview required. This was it. The culmination of the impossible dream. A new life handed to her on a silver platter. Papers, purpose, proximity to home. But something had shifted in her over the past week. She had not just been acting as a bridge for him. She had been rebuilding a bridge to her own forgotten self and her roots. Thank you, she said, her heart pounding. It's an incredible offer, but I have a counter-proposal. Victor raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. I'm listening. I don't want the job as a gift, she said, and I don't want you to pay for my degree. I want you to invest in me. Not as an employee you discovered, but as a partner you value. She took a breath, summoning all the confidence she had gained. I want to run the Casa Herrera integration, not as a director of a department, but as the project lead. Give me a budget and a team, and I want a performance-based contract. If I succeed in doubling its digital presence, while maintaining brand integrity and artisan jobs in 2 years, I get a stake in the subsidiary, a small one but a real one. And I'll pay for my own degree with the salary you give me, and use it to mentor young immigrants in the company. She was asking for responsibility, not our ward. She was asking for a chance to build something herself, not just be a well-paid symbol of diversity. Victor Langford stared at her, his analytical gaze replaced by one of genuine surprise, which slowly morphed into a broad, brilliant smile. It was the first time she had seen him truly smile, and it transformed his face. A college dropout waitress who served me coffee a week ago is now negotiating equity with me on a multi-billion-dollar deal, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. He let out a soft laugh. I knew my instincts were right about you, Sophia Ramirez. I just had no idea how right. He extended his hand. You have a deal. Welcome to Langford Global. Sophia shook his hand, a current of electricity passing between them. It wasn't just a handshake. It was a contract. It was the closing of one chapter of her life and the explosive beginning of another. She was no longer a waitress who spoke Spanish. She was a woman who had found her voice in more ways than one. And she was finally truly home. Sophia's story isn't just about a lucky break. It's a powerful reminder that the person you are right now in whatever job you're working is not the final chapter. Your hidden talents, your forgotten passions, the skills you think no one sees, they have immense value. It was a single moment of kindness and a sentence in Spanish that changed Sophia's life. But it was her courage to step onto that jet, her intelligence to see the real problem, and her confidence to demand her true worth that secured her future. What hidden talent do you have that the world just hasn't seen yet? What would you have done if you found that black envelope? If this story inspired you or made you think, please give this video a thumbs up. It truly helps us bring more stories like this to you. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an incredible journey. And share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that their big break might be just one customer, one conversation, or one moment of courage away. Thank you for listening.